Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. And this is a pretty big one because at the publishing panel from San Diego Comic-Con, we did get the announcement of some new comics, both Avatar and Korra comics. So in short, you know, this tweet probably sums it up here. An Azula standalone graphic novel is coming in summer 2023, and a new Korra comic trilogy is also in the works to begin in 2023. More details to come. Now, I do want to, before we get into the full information, I do want to talk about sort of how the communication went during the panel. So they said ahead of time, they put out a tweet that said, exciting news. Otherwise, I don't think many people were expecting any news from these panels because we've had publishing panels nearly every year at Comic-Con, and it has been years since any news, any new book has been announced at one of these panels. If I remember correctly, the last time I think we saw a book announced was one of the, it was either the Avatar or the Korra coloring book, like the adult coloring book, got announced at a panel. And then I think before that, you have to go back to the original announcement of Korra comics. Back when they had a different artist that they were initially planning to use. And obviously it took ages for Turf Wars to actually come out. They had to get a new artist and stuff like that. But it really has been a very long time since just they announced stuff at one of these panels. So what happened? Panel starts. They're not live tweeting it. And in fact, only one person basically on the entire internet is actually live tweeting it. So major shout out to Cartoon Universe on Twitter here for actually doing this. Because if not, it would have taken us a couple of hours after the panel came to an end for us to find out what actually happened. Because as far as I'm aware, it was only him live tweeting, and then one person I think posted like a low quality image of the Azula comic cover. Otherwise, we did have to wait until what ended up being like an hour and a half after the event for Dark Horse to finally tweet out that, you know, this is what happened. So I actually did quote tweet this and was just kind of like, really? If you missed the news, and as if like the fandom overall, you are meant to have seen the news somewhere else, because it's not like Dark Horse actually posted it anywhere. And if not for those people live tweeting it, we wouldn't have known the news. And I don't know if the little bit of backlash there of just like, come on, show us the stuff that you show people at the panel, caused them to sort of bring up announcements. But eventually they did actually, you know, properly post about things. Now it took a while. It took like until much later on, like probably like 4 or 5 hours after the panel ended for them to finally put this stuff up. When, in my mind, they should have been on this like immediately, because it's the first time you're delivering big news in a very long time, especially in contrast to, say, the panel the day before, where the Braving the Elements panel was still ongoing, but they posted that Janet Varney clip announcing the ATLA movie immediately and everywhere. So huge contrast in communication here, but eventually they finally announced it. Avatar: The Last Airbender, Azula in the Spirit Temple, a standalone graphic novel by Faith Erin Hicks, Peter Wortman, Adele Matera, and Comicraft. Summer 2023, with more details to come. They basically said more details will come when the book is available for pre-order. So that will be basically the description and I suppose a proper release date. Now, a proper release date with Dark Horse doesn't mean much, but hopefully 2023 is the year they get back on track and stick to dates a little bit more. So there's the cover. Very nice piece of art. Azula focused comic. How can you not be excited for that? Interesting though, Azula in the Spirit Temple. So Azula goes to a spirit temple for some reason. We obviously don't know when this is set, but realistically there's only 3 places where it could be set. It's either set in the middle of the show somewhere, which is probably, I think, the least likely option and probably the most kind of boring overall, unless they really deliver something interesting. The second option would be that it's set in between the Search comic and the Smoke and Shadow comic, and it will be used as a way to bridge the gap between Azula in both of those comics. I think I maybe lean towards that. The last option is probably the one most people want, is that this is our first post Smoke and Shadow Azula content, and this is going to kind of set the stage for her character arc and where it goes after Smoke and Shadow. That, I think, is potentially still on the table. My hesitancy to go all in with that is just that these one-shot comics, because that's the thing here, this is a one-shot comic. Again, we don't really know the details, but I'm assuming this is going to be a 72-page comic, in the same way that Katara and the Pirate Silver was, Toph Funk's Metal Bending Academy, Suki alone. It's going to be that. So it's not going to be the full Azula story. This will be, I think, progress towards that, but it's not going to be the comic that I think a lot of people are maybe wanting and waiting for. So I think immediately expectations need to be in place on this. This will do stuff like that, but like, I don't think Azula is going to like meet her mother in this or anything like that. Like, key elements of like what I think needs to happen in Azula's story are probably not going to happen here. Can you read into much from the cover? Okay, there's smoke. So that maybe leads to the idea of, okay, Komurikage, the smoke, they were using that in Smoke and Shadow. But then you look, there's normal smoke on the ground, but then it becomes this interesting pattern, and it feels like it's not entirely random, because look at this, that clearly looks like a little bit of an eye, and there's another eye here, there's a gap in the middle. Like, I think what they're going for here is that I do think that this probably relates in some way to it probably relates in some way to like the events of the search, and that in that book Azula encounters spirits for what must have been the first time in her life, and that maybe leads her to kind of seek things out. Now, I don't know if this is anything connected to the whole faces thing, but like there's something clearly going on here with maybe some sort of a smoke spirit, and so she goes into this spirit temple. The reason I lean towards it being the gap between the search and Smoke and Shadow is that I think the story they'll probably tell is how Azula, in a way, changed from the character she was at the end of the search to making her big sort of change decision to that she now knows her destiny is not to become the Fire Lord herself, and that she accepts that and in fact embraces it. And in that sense, I'm thinking that like, oh, does a spirit show her some sort of a vision? That, especially if it's a dark spirit, you could maybe see how that vision might be misinterpreted by her or shown to her in a way that is a little bit misleading, which is why she makes progress, but not as much progress as you perhaps want. That's the way I would maybe lean, just because I feel like if it was post Smoke and Shadow, I maybe feel they'd be leaning more towards she's wearing like full Komurikage stuff here, but I understand that's more for show, so that doesn't necessarily say anything. So the obviously interesting thing here is that she has this tattered cloak on. Why is that, and what exactly is going on? I'm not sure. In terms of a more technical point, maybe it might explain to us what's going on with the Komurikage, the Fire Warriors, and how they use the smoke. Is it something related to this? Who actually knows? Because that book never explains that. Are they all firebenders and they're just generating the smoke? Or do they have like some sort of a machine that just pumps out a bunch of smoke? Who knows? But still, interesting. It is our typical ATLA team back. And I'm assuming this will be the first of probably 3 more one-shot comics. I'd be very surprised if this is just a kind of one and done thing, because I think they like to organize them in groups of 3. So it opens up the idea of, okay, this is Azula. What are the characters that they do? I don't think they're going to repeat characters, so I think you can immediately eliminate Katara, Toph, and Suki. I think they're maybe not super likely to go straight for, like, say, Aang or Zuko, just because they've been the focus of a lot of the main stories. But I don't think they should be just completely eliminated. Sokka, I think, obviously makes sense to be the most obvious main character who probably could use a solo book. So I think Sokka probably seems relatively likely. And then the last kind of slot for this three, if it is a trio of one-shots, is probably basically the rest of the notable main cast. So like Iroh, absolutely, I think people will be all in for an Iroh. May, I think people will be all up for that. Ty Lee would be interesting to get like a full one-shot comic. And then beyond that, you are maybe stretching things a little bit in terms of what you're actually going to do. Like, obviously, you could really open this up, and it would be very interesting to see, like, say, the comics do, like, a Kyoshi one-shot or a Rangi and actually bring that sort of stuff in. But it does potentially seem like that is more the realm of Abrams in terms of true explorations of like past avatars. That's what their series of books is about. So I can't really see the comics particularly shifting over like that. I think their thing is they get to be the comic adaptation and expansion of ATLA and Korra, and we'll see stuff related to that. So not too much to say on that. We'll move on. Faith Erin Hicks did post about this. What she had to say was this: ridiculously excited about this book. I get to take Azula on a super dark journey, and Peter Wortman knocks it out of the park. It's the Azula story I've been dying to write. So if you've been following like my channel and all the news about comics over the years, since like Faith Erin Hicks came onto the comics, you'll probably note that like it's pretty noted that like she has said in the past that she has been like sort of almost afraid in some ways to write Azula because of what the fan reaction might be. Over the years, that has sort of shifted to becoming, I'm actually kind of interested to write Azula, and now obviously she's done it and is very excited about what actually came out. So the main takeaway here is that it's going to be a super dark journey. So, Azula on a journey. That's why I think the gap between the two mainline comics feels like the way to do that, because there is a character journey that happens in between those two. Whereas the setup post Smoke and Shadow seems to be more that Azula and the Fire Warriors sort of like cause chaos around the Fire Nation and create like a situation for Zuko to deal with. Now, maybe we'll see an instance of that, and the Spirit Temple is just like her way of like releasing spirits or something like that into the Fire Nation for Zuko to have to deal with. But again, it's a solo focused book, so I can't see there being that many other characters involved. So I don't know. It's a tough one, because even if it's that, you still maybe have to cover the idea of her getting the other Fire Warriors out, and that's maybe too many characters. It's confusing, but it's exciting. But again, I want to make it kind of clear on this one that this is probably not going to be the Azula comic we've been waiting for, but I think it will show us an idea of the more modern direction for Azula, because it has been quite a while since Smoke and Shadow came out. I think Faith Erin Hicks will be careful about sort of where she has gone and be very aware of like what has happened to the character in the other comics, the way and direction she was heading in. But we will see now a more recent example of where she's going. The other announcement obviously was just this. More Legend of Korra comics are on the way. A new trilogy. Creators include Kiku Hughes and Alexandria Monique, and will begin in 2023. More details to come. Okay. So, exciting that this is finally happening. Finally official confirmation. Because of course, again, if you followed the news, you'll probably note that like basically like 2 years ago, there was more or less a third Korra comic trilogy confirmed. But obviously, I think something related to Avatar Studios behind the scenes happened. Comics were put on hold temporarily. Stuff happened, and that one either fell to the wayside, had to be scrapped, and this is either a new one or is finally that older one finally beginning to come out. I have a feeling this is probably completely new, just because otherwise I think they'd have it more ready to go, like we'd see covers and stuff like that. So I do have a feeling that whatever they were maybe planning to do in that initial trilogy maybe gets in the way of whatever project Avatar Studios wants to do with Korra, whereas this will be, I suppose, a slight readjustment in terms of what the comics are allowed to do versus what the Avatar Studios is going to do in animation. So, new creative team here. So we have Kiku Hughes writing, which is interesting because otherwise it was Mike writing the Korra comics. Now we have Kiku Hughes writing. She has written on Korra before. She wrote Clearing the Air, the one of the more recent Free Comic Book Day books for Korra. She did art also on Origami from Team Avatar Tales, but she is the writer on this book as far as I'm aware. And because Alexandria Monique is going to be our artist here. Now, an interesting thing with Alexandria Monique is that she has not done, I think, any official work on Avatar yet that's been released, but she is going to be one of the creatives on Patterns in Time. I think a lot of people maybe missed this one, that like ages ago it was more confirmed, like what the full lineup of people actually is. But again, there's 2-3 more stories that we actually don't know about what's going on. But you can see here she is listed as an artist on Patterns in Time. So one of the new stories will include her art and we'll get to see it officially for the first time. Otherwise, if you do want to look at her art, she has done a bunch of Avatar Korra fan art before. I guess this is to a degree how she was discovered and contacted about being involved in the project. So some of her art is more sort of like solo pieces, but I think some of these ones are more kind of representative about what we might actually see from a panel-to-panel comic. So here's some really cool sort of sketches that she did. And it says here, you know, sketches in anticipation of my work with Dark Horse on the Legend of Korra comic, not knowing who the comic will be about just yet. So super interesting that, like, you know, we could find this thing from 6 months ago, but not really know what it's about. Like, is this connected to the trilogy, or is this more about her work on Patterns in Time? Obviously, this is just her doing, like, as she said, warm-up, not knowing what character it is. So that's why she's doing the sort of, like, book 1/3 Korra. But still, I think it looks very good, dynamic, and clean. Really, really good stuff. And then here we find out, like, a fan comic that she actually did. And so you can see some of the kind of behind-the-scenes stuff. Again, the line art is very, very clean. And that's something I always like to see in the trilogy comics. Here it is sort of colored in. Looks really, really good. Now, perhaps we maybe won't see the quality this sort of sky high in a 72-page comic with 3 of them to do, and like the time scale maybe not being as much. But I think this artist is going to be really, really good for the comic. So I'm pretty excited about when we finally get to see Alexandria Monique's work, especially like when we see that cover and get a sense for what it's actually going to be about. Because that's the interesting thing. We actually have nothing to base what this comic will be about on. We don't know what characters are going to be in this book. There's no like obvious setup from the previous 2 comics other than like, will it be a sequel to Turf Wars and Tokuga will come back, or will it be more Kuvira focused? I don't think it will be either of those things. I think it will be another more individual dynamic. Obviously, anytime people mention new Korra comics, it's like, can we finally go to the Fire Nation? Can we finally go to the Fire Nation? Maybe, we'll see. Perhaps. Other than that, it feels like Spirit World stuff is like probably the main plot that we would have going on. I think I would like to see a comic that has more focus for Mako and more focus on Asami, like individually, not just that she's included just for the relationship with Korra. I'd like to see those 2 characters get a little bit more of a spotlight in an upcoming comic, because we've seen, I think, quite a bit of Korra as the focus and also Bolin as the focus. So I think we do need to allow some time for the other main cast to get their chance to shine. Other than that, I think it's just like wild speculation. It could be any and everything that this comic is about. As far as dates go, of course, they said, summer 2023 for the Azula comic. So they have a date for this. So this is obviously coming out before whatever first part of the Korra comic is. That probably means, I would say, July at the earliest. And hopefully they hit that date. So it does mean that like we're still a year away from this. So this is a quite early announcement. Like, we probably won't get the description for this book until probably another couple of months. but we're still a year away, meaning that we're still probably like a year and a quarter away from the release of the first Korra comic. So we will be waiting quite a bit for this, but I like that we get the announcements early and we have a sense for what's actually going to happen next year. So next year's lineup should be, I suppose, something of note. Like, they'll probably have other books to announce, in the sense that they'll have, like, say, the Runes of the Empire Omnibus, I guess will get confirmed at some point. Imbalance Omnibus will have to be confirmed at some point. Beasts of the Four Nations, they will have to talk about eventually, because just arrived this morning was my book 4 deluxe set. So I now have 5 of the 6 deluxe sets, and I'm waiting for that final one to finish my collection at this point. And we still don't know what the status of that book is. So they have that to talk about. The Chibi comic, of course, is out next year. There may or may not be a volume 2 of that. Who knows what's going on with that book. And yeah, then these new books as well. So I think it's all going to be about for next year. If they have anything to come out between the January Chibi comic release and probably July when the Azula comic comes out. Obviously, I assume we'll get the announcement of whatever the next one-shot is to follow up the Azula one. And probably, like I said, some of those other more reprinty style books as well. But Beasts, I think, is an important book to see whenever it comes out. So, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on everything that has happened here. Azula one-shot comic. The big thing here is probably, where do you think it's set? What story will they tell with Azula? And then with the Korra comic, what are your thoughts on, like, the creative team? And what do you think that story will be about? So that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.